For next book, please read Joshua chapter 1 through chapter 13, verse 8, which details the Israelites' conquest of Canaan. Now, if there's a backstory to this clash between the Israelites and their Canaanite and Egyptian neighbors, it might be one about farmers versus herders. And the clash of interest in cultures between settled people and migratory or nomadic people is one of the oldest conflicts on earth, and it's reflected in the Bible just as it's reflected in non-biblical literature. Okay, for example, it's a big theme in American westerns. Okay, the obvious movie that comes to mind is Open Range with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall. Which, if you haven't seen it, do yourselves a favor and watch it. I'm offering a money-back guarantee. But it's a common theme in westerns between herders and farmers, and so in this context, consider the story about Abel the shepherd versus Cain the farmer, who afterwards will go on and found the first city. Okay? Or consider that Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Saul, and David were all shepherds. Okay, so the Bible has a clear and consistent pro-shepherd bias and views urban life and permanent settlement with apprehension, as more easily susceptible to wealth, corruption, and vice. Okay. And historically and archaeologically, we know that the Israelites were originally migratory, and then they settled. Okay. And the Bible matches this archaeological storyline. With the Israelites being migratory from Abraham to Moses, and then being a settled people from Joshua to today. So with the Torah behind us now, we're moving to the clearly historical books of the Bible: Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, the various prophets. So these are books that refer to known historical events that we can put our finger on, books that we can investigate through archaeology, books that were written by some person or persons after these historical events. Okay. Now, I remind you that according to the Jewish tradition, the Torah was written or dictated to Moses by God. Okay. There is no such claim about all the other books of the Bible from Joshua on. Okay. So there's a temptation with these books, with these more historical books, to say, my archaeological research shows that this or that part of Joshua or Judges never happened, and that therefore we should read these books as mumbo jumbo, as fairy tales, as made up history, or fake news, fake history. And so I want to remind you of our method of reading this text. Okay? Just like when we read the Torah, our method with these more historical books is literary. Okay? We look at these ancient writings not as a history textbook or biology or physics textbook, but as texts that aimed to transmit to their audience moral or religious truths about God, about God's justice in the world, about the Jewish people's relationship with God. Now with these books coming up, again, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, it's tricky because they really are histories. But they're not merely histories. Okay? They're still books about God, divine justice, and the connection between God and the Jews. So we could spend our time doing a historical analysis of these books, okay? Focusing on where the text matches the archaeology, where the two part ways, and where we just don't know. Okay? Or we could stick with the literary analysis as we've done thus far. And again, both approaches are obviously legitimate. But if you focus on one, you cannot focus on the other. Okay? So we need to choose whether we are going to read as historians or read as literary analysts. Okay? For example, if focusing on whether the text is reliable about the actual boundaries of David's kingdom and whether he really did turn the tables on the Philistines, then we will miss the character development, the literary character development of the character of David. That is, we will miss the meaning and the moral lessons that the author offers through the literary story of David. We will cheat ourselves out of the most important and beautiful part of the story. Okay? And to illustrate this choice, think of Shakespeare's play about Julius Caesar or about Richard III. Okay? It teaches you a lesson in Roman history or English history. And it teaches you a lesson on human nature, and a lesson on political power, and a lesson on honor and character and morality. Okay? So what would you think of a literature teacher who devotes 90% of the class to examining the historical detail in the play against the historical record, clarifying what's history and where Shakespeare took dramatic license? Okay? Which means that teacher didn't discuss with the students the character development of the different characters and the literary means by which the author offers his insights on morals and psychology and political power and civics. Okay? That teacher would be missing the point of Shakespeare and robbing the students of the true content of Shakespearean literature. Okay? A teacher who sees Shakespeare or the book of Judges or Joshua primarily as a historical source rather than a work of great literature cannot differentiate between what is essential and what is secondary. Okay? It's like eating the ice cream cone and throwing away the ice cream. Okay? Every normal person understands that the point of buying ice cream of buying an ice cream cone is the ice cream itself, not the cone. Okay? The cone, okay, the history in the case of the Torah or Judges or Shakespeare, the history is just, or the cone for the ice cream, the history for Shakespeare or the Bible is just a delivery system. It's not the main point. Okay? So certainly archaeologists and historians must use the Bible as a historical source and evaluate its historicity, because for historians, history really is essential. Okay? Like just like ice cream cones are really essential for ice cream cone inspectors. Okay? So we understand that an ice cream cone inspector will throw away the ice cream to eat the cone because he's a specialist in cones. Okay? Likewise, we should expect the historian to read the Bible or Shakespeare with the tools of history, with an interest in history. Okay? But most Bible readers are not historians and archaeologists. Okay? Their interest in the Bible and their affection for the Bible originated in love for biblical literature, not biblical archaeology. Okay? So take, for example, our book this week. Okay? The book of Joshua tells the story of the Israelites conquering and settling the land of Israel. Okay? The text has an expansive and thorough discussion of how the Israelites conquered all the territories and kingdoms they encountered in Canaan, putting all the inhabitants to the sword. And yet, you'll read a short addendum there in Joshua 13, verses 1 through 6, at the end of the assigned reading, that after reading all the details about the Israelites winning and putting the Canaanites to the sword, in that addendum at the beginning of chapter 13, it points to the many territories and kingdoms and cities that remained in Canaanite and Philistine hands at the end of Joshua's conquests. Okay? And you can add to that the book of Judges, chapter 1, which likewise paints a picture of a very incomplete Israelite conquest and settlement, and points to continued Canaanite existence and sovereignty alongside the newly arrived Israelites during the period of the Judges. Okay. So there's a great body of interesting historical scholarship on this, analyzing Joshua and Judges to reconstruct the ancient history of the Jewish people and of the land itself. Most historians argue that the Joshua story of conquest is exaggerated, and they try to identify the process by which the Israelites settled in the land, at times clashing with the locals, at times intermarrying them, at times living peacefully beside them. Some scholars see the Israelites as newcomers to Canaan from the Negev and the Sinai deserts from the south. Some see them as originating in Canaan itself, that they were actually native to the land. Some see them as conquering Canaanite lands and settling there, whereas others see them as settling peacefully in the less fertile and unsettled hill country, and then only generations later starting to conquer the fertile valleys held by the Canaanites. Okay, so this work of literature, the Bible, like any work of literature from the past, can be read for literary purposes or for historical purposes. And it means that the readers need to understand that they're making, when the readers start reading, they need to understand that they're making a choice. Okay? You cannot read a text simultaneously as a historian and as a reader of literature. Okay, so these are two fields of study, and we leave one for one and the other to the other. Okay. See you next time.